And so you are?
I'm Katherine Fulton. I'm president of the Monitor Institute.
And what is the Monitor Institute?
Monitor Institute is the social change practice of a large global consulting firm, Monitor Group, and we work with innovative leaders to develop and implement sustainable solutions to large problems.
So how did you end up there?
So I have for the last 10 years been working with all range of philanthropists, new philanthropists, old philanthropists, small philanthropists, big philanthropists, as they really come to terms with how do we do better than we've done in the past in addressing these large social and environmental problems that are very intractable. And increasingly, a lot of people are starting to look at all of their assets, not just their philanthropic grants, the dollars that they invest, their ability to lobby, lots of other things. And I got very interested in the way in which the unit of analysis is no longer philanthropy, it's the impact you want to have. And therefore then it's what the tools are. And so I've been doing a study funded by a number of big foundations on how we can accelerate the evolution of investing for impact.
So where are we now in this evolutionary process?
So it's not new. It's been going on for a long time, for several decades really, arguably longer than that, where lots of people have heard of microfinance and Grameen Bank and that sort of thing, which is international. And there's also been in the United States for almost 3 decades a lot of investment in lower income neighborhoods and community development finance. These things have been developing kind of in silos separate from each other. And have become more mainstream, and lots of larger investors have been going into them. But the notion of investing for impact, if you're an investor and you've got the money that you want to have the largest possible return, and you've got money that you may give away for philanthropy, you don't think about those similarly. The question would be, what if you said to yourself, you could walk into a broker and you could say, I'd like to take 10% of my money, and I don't want to lose it all, but I'm willing to invest it. I want to invest it in building schools in the inner city, or lower income housing, or microfinance, etc. Right now it's not possible to do that. So where we are is that people who are very specialized or big players and can do these kind of customized things can do this. It's a stage of what we think of as uncoordinated innovation. And I think we're at the moment where we're about to build the channels to go to the mainstream investor. All of the intermediaries, the banks and the rating agencies, and all kinds of things that are necessary to help assure me, an average investor, that what I'm putting my money into is real. And I think we're going to spend the next 5 to 10 years building that industry out, and then I think it's going to scale very rapidly.
So what are the stakes here? How large is the total investment pool, and how much of that do you think could start to become? Well,
first of all, nobody knows how large it is now. It's very hard to count because it's global and it's done differently in different parts of the world. But our best estimate is that if you take all of the money that's under investment and you were to take just 1% of that and say, could we put it into this type of investment for a reasonable amount of money, that could easily be $500 billion, $500 billion. We think that the market could easily be that size relatively soon. And if you then look at, that's nearly twice the size of all philanthropy in the United States today. So you could really increase the pool of money that goes to drive a good, in a social or environmental good. And I think given the urgency of the problems that we face, the inequities, climate change and other things, this is very important. I think the government can play a big role in helping to accelerate this by shifting some of the tax incentives, which I hope some of the current crisis will accelerate that process from what it might ordinarily have been.
Well, we've just come from your talk here at SOCAP 08, and you put this great slide up there which described the 4 stages of the evolutionary process. And suggested that we're somewhere between the first and the second stage right now.
Right.
What are the elements, what are the building blocks that are necessary to take us from where we are now to maturity? Right.
Well, we think there are 3 big things that have to happen. The first is that we need better intermediary structures. And so we're in this marketplace building stage, and all an intermediary means is ways in which buyers and sellers are brought together. And traditionally things like investment banks, investor clubs and circles, electronic marketplaces. There are going to be all kinds of ways where somebody says, I have this need, and somebody can raise their hand and say, I have the capital to put into your deal. There'll be actually funds that, products and funds where people bundle investments together. Right now, everything is a one-off, right? And there need to be ways of making it easy for somebody to put their money into something. So that's the first thing. And I think entrepreneurs are going to take care of that. Then I think there is a larger infrastructure that we need where it's like, what is this? What is the language? What are the metrics and standards that govern the marketplace? What are the rules? And that's the kind of thing that trade associations and standard-setting bodies, tend to get created as industries arise. The reason that we have digital photography that works is that all the manufacturers got together and agreed on how these things could talk to each other between cameras and computers and devices to display them, etc. The same kind of thing needs to happen in making it possible to invest in different types in microfinance and community development and clean technology and make the investment substitutable. And that's what the creation of an industry looks like. But while we're doing all those things that essentially organize the supply side of to make it possible for money to get in, we also need to be helping the businesses themselves, finding the business models that are ready to scale, finding the best entrepreneurs, helping them develop their organizations, their own skills, their own ability to accept larger sums of money and scale what they're doing. Because the last thing we want is to have a great big supply of capital and not enough places to put it that are effective. So it's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing, and that's why I think we have to work on all of these things at the same time. I think the current crisis, if it's handled well, could actually help us build this marketplace out by perhaps moving forward from when it would have happened policy changes that in terms of the carbon economy, making it possible to change over to a different energy system, the jobs that get created for that, the ability to give people certain kind of tax benefits for doing some of these type of investments, for taking on the risk. I think that we may be able to do some things in a policy sense as we look at reforming the financial system and the fiscal stimulus packages that we're likely to have in the next administration and Congress that will provide a real opportunity to accelerate the development of this kind of investing.
So yesterday I was talking with Jed Emerson, and we're imagining this infrastructure. And in fact, I've been involved with an effort to try and imagine it and structure it. And so I said to Jed, who's going to be interested? Who's going to fund this whole thing? Is this going to be the Rockefeller Foundation, the big boys? And he says, no way. He says, there's too much inertia there. It's too threatening to the way they've been doing business for 50 years. Do you agree with that? And if so, where's the capital going to come from to organize the infrastructure?
Well, we're working on a blueprint that analyzes the types of actions that are needed, and I think that one of the things we're looking at is what's the type of capital needed? Can it come from entrepreneurs? Is it investable opportunities where people are building businesses themselves, all the way up to subsidy of some kind from a government or some kind of philanthropic thing? And then there's the question of, can some of these things be done by individuals and individual organizations, or is it going to require small clusters of people and organizations, or does it actually require kind of field level intervention? I would argue, for instance, on the creation of standards and metrics, it's field level and it's going to require some subsidy. It's not about, it's not a investable for-profit opportunity to create that. And whereas I think some of the other things, like say some of the funds that are going to get created, organizations or clusters of organizations using their own capital can do that. So I actually think there is a role for philanthropic subsidy and philanthropic leadership, and I think we're actually going to see that. come forward from some of the players, because they are very interested in how the things that they're doing can be leveraged by mainstream capital, and so I think there's going to be an incentive for some of the more older traditional foundations to do some of this. So I actually disagree with Jed on that.
Are you aware of any models? You spoke of leverage, and most of the time, when people in the philanthropic world use the term leverage, they're essentially using it as metaphor.
Yes.
Because it really doesn't involve financial leverage in a strict sense. Are you aware of any models that introduce the power of financial leverage to the philanthropic world?
Yeah, there've started to be a number of experiments on this, and I think we're going to see a lot more. But you know, just the one famous example that actually did, I think it was $50 million of you know, sort of the first tranche of mortgages that then leveraged. This was for the Self-Help Credit Union, a community finance development institution in North Carolina, that then made it possible actually for Fannie Mae, this is some years ago, to open up the market to some types of things they wouldn't have ordinarily done. And this was not some of the things that have been gotten into so much trouble recently, but there was a very, very low default rate, and mortgages were able to be provided to people that otherwise seemed like a risk. And so that was, I don't think the Ford Foundation lost a dime on that, but it vastly leveraged what they were able to do by use their money as leveraged much greater sums. And I think that was a direct example as opposed to a metaphorical one. And I think we're going to see more and more of that, of different types of capital come together where there's different risk tolerance.
So just one final question. In your talk, you spoke of the need for us being willing to fail in this process. What do you mean by that?
Well, there will be failure, and you know, I think there's good failure and bad failure. The thing that I'm concerned about is failure from sloppiness, failure from overpromising, failure from lacking rigorous execution. And you know, I think that there's always failure when you're trying new things. I'd like to see us fail fast, learn from it, be able to apply it, have a system, an infrastructure, or an ecosystem around this, where the lessons can be shared very rapidly among different types of funds and enterprises, and we can get smart faster. And I think that's one of the great potentials of this moment, when which we are all newly connected, and so you know, we need to fail in order to learn. That's when. But I have a saying, which is that we should all try to make new mistakes, and that means that we should never ever make a mistake that someone else has already made, and we just have been too lazy to find out about it. But we should be willing to take mistakes. We should be willing to take risks that allow us to make new mistakes. So I think that's what I was talking about.
As I told you, my background was in renewable energy, and back in the mid-'80s, wind power was one of the huge promises there on the horizon. And there was a company that had developed a major power scale wind energy system, and they installed it up in Medicine Bow, Wyoming. And to great fanfare, they invited the national media and everyone to show up at the site for this. And the night before, there was this huge windstorm that came up, much more than they had anticipated, and it blew the whole thing down.
Oh no.
So the next day, with all the media present there, the director of this whole thing was asked, is anything salvageable from this? And his response seems to resonate with what you just said. He said, only experience. So on that positive note, thank you very much for your time, Katherine.
Thank you. And